The sterile white walls of the Arcturus Corporation headquarters seemed to mock Elias Thorne. 20 years he'd poured into this company, architecting its revolutionary data encryption algorithms, the very bedrock upon which its multi-billion-dollar empire was built. Now he stood, a discarded relic, before the polished mahogany desk of Julian Vance, Arcturus's newly appointed CEO. Vance, barely 30, with a slicked-back hairstyle and an aura of manufactured confidence, didn't even bother to look up from his tablet. "Thorne," he finally drawled, the name laced with thinly veiled contempt. "Your department, it's redundant. We're streamlining, implementing AI solutions. Your skill set is outdated." Elias swallowed the bile rising in his throat. Outdated. He had practically invented the damn skill set. "But Mr. Vance," he began, his voice tight with suppressed fury, "the AI solutions you're referring to are based on my algorithms. They require the foundational encryption protocols I designed. Without them," Vance finally met his gaze, a cold, dismissive glint in his eyes. "Without them, Arcturus will adapt. The market demands innovation, not clinging to the past. Consider this your severance package." He slid a thick envelope across the desk. "Security will escort you out." The humiliation was a physical blow. Elias felt his face flush, his hands tremble. He wanted to scream, to rail against the injustice, but the words caught in his throat. He picked up the envelope, its weight a pathetic substitute for 2 decades of loyalty and dedication. As he was led through the gleaming corridors, past the oblivious faces of his former colleagues, the weight of the injustice solidified into a cold, burning resolve. Vance thought he could simply discard him, erase his contribution. Vance was wrong. He underestimated Elias Thorne. He underestimated the depth of his knowledge, the intricate web of security protocols only he truly understood, the very vulnerabilities he had deliberately built into the system as a safeguard, a failsafe against precisely this kind of corporate arrogance. What Vance didn't know, what no one at Arcturus knew, was that Elias hadn't just designed the system. He was the system. He held the master key, the ultimate backdoor, the ability to unravel the entire infrastructure with a few lines of code. He had initially created this failsafe to protect Arcturus from external threats, but now it would serve a different purpose. He wouldn't simply disappear. He wouldn't fade into obscurity. He would make Vance regret the day he ever dismissed Elias Thorne. He would expose the flaws Vance so arrogantly overlooked, the vulnerabilities that lay dormant beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to erupt. He would reclaim his dignity, his respect, and he would watch Vance's carefully constructed empire crumble around him. The security guard stopped at the entrance, gesturing towards the exit. Elias looked back at the imposing glass building, a silent promise etched on his face. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The beginning of Vance's downfall. Resumo temático. Especialista em sua área é humilhado e dispensado por gestor arrogante que ignora a importância de seu trabalho, mas ele detém a chave para o sucesso da empresa e usa esse conhecimento para se vingar e reconquistar o respeito perdido. He spent the next few weeks a ghost in his own life. The severance package, while substantial, felt like blood money. He barely touched it. Instead, he retreated to his small, cluttered apartment, a stark contrast to the gleaming corporate tower he'd called his professional home. Sleep was fitful, haunted by Vance's smug face and the echo of the word outdated. He started small, almost compulsively. Late nights were spent hunched over his ancient computer, not writing code, but meticulously documenting it. Every algorithm, every protocol, every subtle nuance of the Arcturus system was painstakingly transcribed, annotated, and backed up onto multiple secure drives. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about preserving his legacy, the intellectual property that Vance so casually dismissed. One rainy afternoon, a name surfaced in his research: Clara Moreno, a rising star in cybersecurity, known for her aggressive, independent approach. He'd vaguely heard of her, seen her speak at a conference once. An idea, audacious and risky, began to form. He needed an ally, someone who understood the stakes and wouldn't be intimidated by Arcturus's power. He found her online, a cryptic email address buried in the footnotes of a research paper. He crafted a message, carefully worded, hinting at vulnerabilities within a major corporation's encryption system and offering a mutually beneficial collaboration. He held his breath and hit send. 2 days later, a reply, short, sharp, and to the point: "Meet me neutral ground tomorrow, 10 a.m. the Obsidian Cafe downtown." The Obsidian Cafe was a dimly lit bohemian spot, the air thick with the aroma of strong coffee and hushed conversations. Clara Moreno was exactly as he'd pictured, intense, focused, with a sharp intelligence that radiated from her dark eyes. "You're Elias Thorne," she stated. Not a question, but a confirmation. Arcturus. Encryption. You were let go? He nodded, the humiliation momentarily resurfacing. Simplified version, yes. And you have something Arcturus doesn't want me to see, she pressed, her voice low. I have everything, Elias replied, his gaze meeting hers. I designed their entire system, and I know where the cracks are. Clara leaned forward, her expression unreadable. What's your price, Mr. Thorne? Not money, Elias said. Respect, and to watch Julian Vance eat his words. Vance is arrogant, but he's not stupid, Clara countered. This won't be easy. Easy wasn't part of the equation, Elias said, a flicker of a smile playing on his lips. He thinks he's streamlined the company. He's about to discover he streamlined it right into a trap. He paused, then added, he told me my skills were outdated. He's about to find out just how wrong he is. Clara studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, Mr. Thorne, let's make some noise. Resumo temático. Especialista em sua área é humilhado e dispensado por gestor arrogante que ignora a importância de seu trabalho, mas ele detém a chave para o sucesso da empresa e usa esse conhecimento para se vingar e reconquistar o respeito perdido. Noise, it turned out, was a carefully orchestrated symphony of disruption. Clara, with her network of black hat hackers and security consultants, was the conductor. Elias, the composer. Their first move was subtle, a series of minor glitches in Arcturus's system, delayed transactions, corrupted files, nothing catastrophic, but enough to cause frustration and raise eyebrows. Vance, predictably, dismissed them as teething problems with the new AI. He's blaming the AI, Clara said, a smirk playing on her lips during one of their late-night encrypted video calls. Thinks it's still learning the ropes. Let him, Elias replied, a cold satisfaction creeping into his voice. He'll learn soon enough. The glitches escalated. Suddenly, secure data transfers were taking hours, customer databases were intermittently inaccessible, and internal communications were plagued by inexplicable errors. Panic started to ripple through Arcturus. Vance, his manufactured confidence beginning to crack, summoned his IT team. Elias, through Clara's contacts, received a leaked transcript of the meeting. Vance's voice, usually so smooth and condescending, was laced with desperation. What the hell is going on? He roared. I was promised seamless integration. I was assured the AI was foolproof. A nervous IT manager stammered, We're running diagnostics, Mr. Vance. The AI is performing as expected. The problem seems to be deeper. We're seeing anomalies in the core encryption protocols. Vance's voice dropped to a dangerous level. Anomalies? What kind of anomalies? They're almost like backdoors, sir. Points of vulnerability we can't explain. It's as if someone intentionally created them. Elias allowed himself a small smile. He could almost taste Vance's growing unease. The next phase was bolder. Using the vulnerabilities Elias had identified, Clara's team subtly manipulated market data, creating minor fluctuations that cost Arcturus millions. The stock price dipped, then wavered, then began a slow, agonizing descent. Investors grew nervous. Rumors of internal instability began to circulate. Vance, now visibly frantic, called an emergency board meeting. The pressure was mounting. His reputation, his career, everything was on the line. We need to find the source of these vulnerabilities, he pleaded with the board, his voice hoarse. I assure you, we're working around the clock to fix them. One of the board members, a stern woman with years of experience, fixed him with a skeptical gaze. Vance, you promised us innovation, streamlined efficiency. Instead, we're hemorrhaging money. What's changed? Vance hesitated, then blurted out, There were some legacy systems that were outdated. We let go of some personnel who were resistant to the new AI integration. The woman raised an eyebrow. Outdated systems? Are you suggesting that these outdated systems are somehow responsible for this crisis? Vance squirmed. It's a possibility we're exploring. Elias, listening to the leaked transcript with Clara, felt a surge of vindication. The seed of doubt had been planted. Vance was starting to unravel. Then came the turning point. Clara discovered something unexpected, a hidden clause in Elias's original contract with Arcturus, buried deep within the legal jargon. A clause stating that Elias retained intellectual property rights over the core encryption algorithms he designed, even after his employment ended, a failsafe he had completely forgotten about. Elias, Clara said, her voice tight with excitement. You own the algorithms, legally. Vance doesn't just have a vulnerability problem, he has an ownership problem. The implications were staggering. Arcturus's entire business model was built on technology they didn't fully own. Elias held the ultimate trump card. He could shut down their entire operation with a single legal challenge. He knew then that he wouldn't just reclaim his respect, he would reclaim his company. Resumo temático. Especialista em sua área é humilhado e dispensado por gestor arrogante que ignora a importância de seu trabalho, mas ele detém a chave para o sucesso da empresa e usa esse conhecimento para se vingar e reconquistar o respeito perdido. So, Clara began, a predatory gleam in her eye. We have a choice. We can bleed them dry slowly, watching Vance squirm as his empire crumbles, or, she paused for dramatic effect, we can detonate the whole thing. Elias leaned back in his chair, considering. The slow burn was satisfying, watching Vance's arrogance dissolve into panic, but the thought of a complete and utter takedown, of exposing Vance's incompetence on a global scale, was undeniably tempting. Detonate, he said, a grim smile spreading across his face. Let's make sure everyone knows the house of cards was built on my back. Clara nodded, her fingers flying across her laptop. I'll prepare the documents. We file a cease and desist order claiming intellectual property infringement publicly tomorrow morning. The next day, the news hit Arcturus like a tidal wave. The cease and desist order, plastered across every major financial news outlet, accused Arcturus of illegally utilizing Elias Thorne's patented encryption algorithms. The stock price plummeted. Investors panicked. Vance's phone rang incessantly, each call a fresh wave of recrimination. He stormed into his office, his face a mask of fury. He summoned his legal team, demanding answers. How could this happen? He roared, slamming his fist on the mahogany desk. I was assured everything was above board. The head of legal, a pale, nervous man named Davies, stammered, Mr. Vance, we reviewed Mr. Thorne's contract. There is a clause, a rather obscure clause, that grants him intellectual property rights. Vance's face went white. Impossible, I would have remembered that. Davies shuffled his feet. It was buried deep, sir, and the technology was deemed redundant at the time. Vance felt a cold dread creep into his bones. Redundant. That word echoed in his ears, a constant reminder of his own arrogance. He paced his office, desperately trying to formulate a plan. He couldn't let this happen. Arcturus was his legacy, his ticket to the top. He had to salvage the situation, no matter the cost. He picked up the phone and dialed Elias Thorne's number. Elias watched the number flash on his phone, a wave of satisfaction washing over him, the call he'd been waiting for. He answered, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. Vance, he said. Thorne, Vance replied, his voice tight with desperation. We need to talk. This cease and desist order, it's a mistake. We can work something out. Work something out? Elias repeated, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. You called my life's work outdated. You threw me out like garbage. Now you want to work something out? I was wrong, Thorne, Vance pleaded. I admit it. I underestimated you. Please name your price. Anything. Elias paused, savoring the moment. My price, Vance, is simple. Public acknowledgement of my contribution to Arcturus, a full apology for the way you treated me, and your resignation. Vance was silent for a moment, weighing his options. His career against the complete destruction of Arcturus. And if I refuse, he asked, his voice barely a whisper, then I'll shut down your entire operation, Elias replied, his voice hard as steel, and I'll make sure everyone knows that Julian Vance, the Boy Wonder CEO, brought Arcturus to its knees because of his own arrogance and ignorance. He could hear Vance's heavy breathing on the other end of the line. Finally, Vance spoke, his voice defeated. All right, Thorne, he said, you win. The next day, a press conference was held at Arcturus headquarters. Julian Vance, his face pale and drawn, stood before the assembled reporters and delivered a carefully worded statement. I want to publicly acknowledge the invaluable contribution of Elias Thorne to Arcturus Corporation, he said, his voice flat and lifeless. Mr. Thorne's encryption algorithms are the foundation of our success, and I deeply regret the way he was treated. I offer him my sincerest apologies. He then announced his resignation, effective immediately. Elias watched the press conference on television, a quiet satisfaction spreading through him. He had won. He had reclaimed his dignity, his respect, and he had brought Julian Vance to his knees. But as he watched Vance's defeated figure walk away from the podium, a strange feeling washed over him. It wasn't triumph. It was emptiness. He had achieved his revenge, but it hadn't brought him the peace he had expected. Clara, who was sitting beside him, noticed his expression. What's wrong, Elias? She asked. You did it. You won. Elias sighed. I know, he said, but it doesn't feel as good as I thought it would. Maybe, Clara said, because revenge is never as satisfying as it seems. Maybe what you really wanted was not to destroy Vance, but to be recognized for your work. Elias looked at her, surprised by her insight. Maybe you're right, he said. So, Clara said, a mischievous glint in her eye, what are you going to do now? You own the algorithms. You could start your own company. You could build something even better than Arcturus. Elias smiled. The emptiness began to fade, replaced by a flicker of excitement. He had spent so long focused on revenge that he had forgotten about his passion, his creativity. Maybe I will, he said. Maybe it's time to start building again. He paused, then looked at Clara. "And maybe," he added, "I'll need a brilliant cybersecurity expert to help me." Clara grinned. "I think I know just the person." The Arcturus saga had ended, but for Elias Thorne, a new chapter was just beginning. A chapter filled with possibilities, with challenges, and with the opportunity to finally build something truly meaningful, something that would last. This time, it would be on his own terms, and this time, he would make sure his name was etched in the foundation.